Encoding and decoding. So, encoding or decoding is a communication model introduced by Stuart Hall in 1973. Stuart Hall challenged the idea that media messages are received exactly as they were sent. So instead, he emphasized that audiences actively interpreted what they watch, what they read, or what they hear, using their own social backgrounds, belief, and cultural codes. So the model's three key moments from John Kerner's interpretation. Moment of encoding. So these are the three models, the model's three key moments of John Kerner's interpretation. Moment of encoding, the process of productions, meaning is embedded into the text through institutional practices and social context. Next, moment of the text, the form and symbolic content of the media output itself. Example, news story, TV show. Next is the moment of decoding, the audience perception and interpretation. Meaning is interpreted through personal experience, beliefs, and available codes. So that are the model's 3K moments from John Kerner's interpretation. Moment of encoding, moment of the text, and moment of decoding. So, meaning is not fixed. So Hall argued that decoding do not follow inevitably from encodings. Even if a message is encoded a certain way, it may be understood differently by audiences depending on cultural context, social identity, personal experience, and familiarity with the media codes. So so there are some types of audiences reading interpretive position. First is dominant hegemonic reading. The audience fully agrees with the intended or preferred meaning. In dominant reading, the media's passage is accepted as neutral and true. Example, watching a news report and agreeing completely with its viewpoint. Next is negotiated reading. The audience partially agrees but modifies the meaning based on a personal context or experience. Example is agreeing with a film's message but questioning how it's presented. That is negotiated reading. Next is oppositional reading. The audience completely disagrees with the message and interpret it through alternative ideological framework. Example in oppositional reading, a viewer from an opposing political party watch a group. So that are some types of audience reading in interpretive position. Next is aberrant decoding. It is according to Umberto Eco. So, this as what do you call this one? This about this reports, the aberrant decoding by Umberto Eco, it is some important key concept of encoding or decoding. A while ago are some important key concept of decoding, encoding. So, Eco introduced the idea of aberrant decoding. When a text is interpreted using different codes than the ones intended by the producer. Example, a Western commercial shown in a non-Western country being misunderstood, it is because of its cultural differences. Again, A Western example of this aberrant decoding is a Western commercial shown in non-Western country being misunderstood. It is because of the differences in its cultural differences. Eco also defined closed text, strongly pushed one specific interpretation. Next is open text. Encourage multiple interpretation. So that is aberrant decoding, which is introduced by Umberto Eco. Next. So that is encoding and decoding. Decoding is a communication model. It was introduced by Stuart Hall, 1973. Stuart Hall emphasized that audience actively interpreted what they watch, read, or hear using their own social backgrounds, belief, and cultural codes. Next, here are some important key concepts of decoding and encoding. The model's 3 key moments: moment of the encoding, the process of production; the moment of the text, the form and the symbolic content. Next is moment of decoding, which is the audience receptions and interpretation. Another important concept: the meaning is not fixed. Hall argued that the codes do not follow inevitably from encoding. Next is the types of audience: the dominant reading, the negotiated reading, oppositional reading. And also lastly, aberrant decoding according to Umberto Eco. So there are some criticism of Hall's model. So critics like Morley's and Myers have questioned, how can we be sure what is the preferred reading? So are readers really fixed into one role, dominant, negotiated, and oppositional? Is it realistic to believe media producers always encode just one dominant meaning? So post-structuralists argue that reading are multiple, shifting, and never entirely stable. So to sum it up, about decoding and encoding. So encoding, how media texts are produced and meaning embedded into them. Decoding, how audience interpret and make sense of those texts. So also, dominant reading, audience accept the intended message. Negotiated reading, audience partly agrees and partly resist. In the optional reading, audience understand but reject the message. So in aberrant reading, reading a message with a completely different cultural or ideological code. Also, in closed versus open text, closed one meaning and open text is it has multiple interpretation. That is encoding and decoding. Thank you. So let's proceed to articulation. So articulation is semiotics, is a metaphor for how meaning is structured. First used in linguistics by Andre Martinet, then adapted by Bourdieu. It does not refer to pronunciation, but how elements combine to create meaning. So in articulation, in semiotics, articulation does not mean pronunciation, like in speech. Instead, it refers to how semiotic system like language is broken down into smaller units. Example, example in metaphor, articulation is like a truck with detachable trailers. So you can rearrange them. In language, words trailers are put together to form sentences truck. You can break them apart and reattach them. So again, in semiotics, articulation refers to how signs in a code are structured, whether they can be broken into smaller meaning or non-meaningful parts. Articulation, it is similar to the way an articulated lorry has separable parts. Articulation not to be confused with everyday usage related to speech clarity. So there are types of articulation. Double articulation. If we're going to describe double articulation, there are two levels. First articulation, meaningful units. Example, words or morpheme. So the first level of articulation in double articulation, break down messages into meaningful signs, like words. And the second articulation, break down sign or words into smaller meaningless units like sounds or letter. So again, there are two levels in double articulation, the first articulation and second articulation. In first articulation, meaningful units. Example, words or morphemes. And the second level is the second articulation, meaningless but functional unit. Example, phonemes or letter. Example in double articulation is the verbal language like English. So why is double articulation important? Why is it that double articulation is important? With only small number meaningless units like 26 letters or basic words, we can create unlimited number of meaningful signs or word sentences. It is also important because this makes language flexible and powerful. Also, this is why language is called symbolic system, not just a code. Next is second articulation only. So description of the first articulation only meaningful units exist, not broken into smaller meaningless parts. Example of the first articulation only is the traffic sign, bird calls, pictograms. Second is second articulation only. So the description of that is only meaningless units combined to form arbitrary codes or no dependent meaningful units. So example is binary code, based on that example, serial numbers. Next is no articulation. Signs are isolated and have no shared structure or recurrent patterns. Example, language of flowers, where each flowers equals separate meaning. So again, why double articulation matters? It is because with only a small number of meaningless units, like 26 letters or basic sounds, we can create an unlimited number of meaningful signs, words, or sentences. This makes language flexible and powerful. This is why language is a code, a symbolic system, not just a code. So here is an example of articulation in other system. So communication system. Flower as messages. So in first level, meaningful units has no. Second level is meaningless units, no. Spoken language, first level, yes. Second level, yes. Pictogram example signs, yes. And second level, no. Binary code, example computer. So, if we're going to explain this table, spoken language has both words, meaningful, and sounds. In pictograms, each symbol has. So again, let's discuss this table. So again, spoken language has both words, meaningful, and sound, meaningless. So pictograms, each symbol has meaning, but can't broken into smaller units. Again, pictograms, each symbol has meaning but can't broken into smaller units. Next is binary code. Binary code only has 1 and zeros, not meaningful by itself. Flowers, no clear units of meaning or meaningless building blocks. So that's the explanation in this table. So there are some limits of visual and verbal system. A non-verbal system. Philosopher Susan Langer said, non-verbal systems like pictures or music are less precise than verbal language. Why? It is because they can't be broken down the same way. They're more ambiguous and interpreted emotionally, and they do not follow rules like grammar. So, don't treat pictures like words. They don't work the same way. So again, to sum it up about articulation. Articulation explains how complex meaning can come from simple building blocks. Language is unique because it has double articulation. And in other systems, visual, music, gestures are important but less structured. And also, we should understand how meaning is created differently in various systems. So that is articulation. Next is intertextuality. So, what is intertextuality? So, intertextuality is a concept that no text exists in isolation. Instead, all texts are connected. So again, what is intertextuality? Intertextuality is the concept that no text exists in isolation. Instead, all texts are connected through a vast network of influences, references, creations, genres, and cultural expectation. So according to Daniel Chandler says, texts owe more to other texts than to their own maker. So, what does this mean? So again, what does this mean? So, again, Daniel Chandler says, texts owe more to others' texts than to their own makers. So, this means that this code expresses the core idea of intertextuality, that the meaning of any given text is not created from scratch by the author, but instead shaped by a network of previous texts, cultural convention, and shared codes. Why it really matters? Authors are not entirely original creators when they produce a text, whether a book, film, speech, or ads. They draw upon existing genres, styles, phrases, and ideas that already exist in the culture. So readers make sense of text through comparisons. When we read or watch something, we understand it is based on a prior experience with similar text. For example, a horror film makes sense because we've seen others like it. Another example, a Roman comedy plays patterns we already know. So meaning comes from relationship, not just intention. A text means something not simply because of what the author intended, but because of how it relates to to other texts, and how the audience interprets this connection. Another example, let's say a movie shows a lone hero fighting injustice in a dystopian world. So even without explanation, we understand what's going on because with a similar narrative in the Hunger Games, Mad Max, or The Matrix. So that's intertextuality. The movie's meaning comes from a shared cultural framework, not just what the director wrote in the script. This code challenges the traditional view the authors are the sole owner of meanings. Instead, it emphasizes that meaning is constructed by cultural system, other texts, and readers, which is a post-structuralist view of the meaning, the view of language and meaning. Let's proceed. So, origin of the concept. Introduced by Julia Kristeva, inspired by Mikhail Bakhtin, she emphasized two axes in a text. Horizontal axis between author and reader, vertical axis between one text and another. So these axes are united by shared codes. Every text is shaped by earlier discourse, meanings, and expectations. So the myth of originality, structuralism and post-structuralism challenge the idea of a text as a unique original creation. Instead, language pre-exists the author. So the subject is spoken by language. Example, the death of the author, Barthes. A text meaning lies in its destination, the reader, not its origin. So, next we're going to discard the Gerard Genet's 5 types of intertextuality, aka transtextuality. So, intertextuality, it is codes, allusions, and plagiarism. Next is paratextuality. Tiles, footnotes, epigraphs, preface materials surrounding the main text. Architextuality, genre or category a text belong. Example, horror, comedy. Metatextuality, one text commenting on other. Example, criticism or reviews. Next is hypotextuality or aka hypertextuality, transformation like remakes, sequels, parodies, and adaptations. So, features that define intertextuality. Chandler notes several characteristics to look for. Reflexivity. Is the text self-aware of its intertextuality? Alliteration. How much does it change the source? Explicitness. Are the reference abused or hidden? Criticality to comprehension. Do you need to get the reference to understand the text? Scale of adaptation. How much of the original is used? Structural unboundedness. Is the text clearly part of a bigger genre or or series. So that is some features that define intertextuality. So intertextuality in media and pop culture, some spoofs and parodies, example Scary Movie, Shrek, film remakes, example A Star is Born, TV reference, example The Simpsons, Family Guy, genres like docudrama, informational, blends forms and play with boundaries. So these practices engage audience by rewarding those with prior knowledge, offering them the pleasure of recognition. So readers as meaning makers. Chandler says, ultimately readers, not authors, are the determinants of the meaning of the text and the relations between them. So reading becomes a social contract, interpreting text based on shared cultural knowledge, previous media exposure, and genre expectations. So even our real-life experiences are framed by media. So according to Oscar Wilde, life imitates arts. So again, to summarize, intertextuality tells us no text is origin or isolated. Text codes reshape, allude to, and build on others. Readers use prior texts, genres, and cultural codes to interpret the meaning. So the more we understand intertextuality, the better we can critically engage with media literature and communication. So intertextuality reminds us that the meaning is not made from scratch. Every time we read, watch, or listen, we are decoding layers of cultural history. So that is intertextuality. To sum it up from codes, mode of address, encoding, decoding, articulation, and intertextuality. So code, a structured system of signs and convention that shape meaning. So there are types of codes: social codes, language, behavior, and fashion; textual codes, media, formats, and genres; interpretive codes, how audience perceive and decode meaning. So meaning exists within a code. Without shared convention, communication wouldn't work. So mode of address, how a text speaks to its audience. Direct versus indirect. Direct, acknowledge the audience. Example, TV news anchoring looking at the camera. So that is direct. Indirect, ignores the audience. Example, characters in the film. Formality and social distance. Intimate, casual, and personal. For example, vlog, social media posts. Public to formal and distant. Example, political speeches, academic papers. So the key idea in mode of addresses, the mode of addresses position the audience and influence the interpretation. So encoding and decoding, according to Stuart Hall, media messages are created, encoded by producers, but audience decode them differently. So there are three decoding positions: dominant, hegemonic, audience fully agrees with the intended meaning; negotiated, audience partly agrees but partly questions it; oppositional, audience completely rejects the intended meaning. So in encoding and decoding, communication is not passive. Audience actively construct meaning. So next is articulation, the process of linking concepts, signs, or identities together to create meaning. So in linguistic articulation, first articulation, signs made of meaningful units, words or morphemes. That is the first articulation. Second articulation, smaller units, phonemes, that by themselves lack meaning. So in cultural articulation in Stuart Hall, ideas and identities are joined together in discourse but can be redefined. Example, masculinity linked with strength, but cultural shifts may change this. So in articulation, meaning is not fixed. It depends on how concepts are articulated with a given culture. Lastly, intertextuality definition, the idea is that all texts are connected. They reference, quote, or respond to previous text. So there are two types of intertextuality according to Genet's transtextuality. Then intertextuality, direct reference, quotation. Paratextuality, titles, preface, books, and book covers. Metatextuality, one text commenting on other. Example, film reviews. Hypotextuality, transformation. Example, remakes and parodies. So architectuality is genre convention. So in intertextuality, meaning is never purely original. It's shaped by previous texts, cultural codes, and audience expectations. So overall conclusion, all these semiotic concepts works together. Codes create meaning through structured sign. Modes of address shape how message reach an audience. Encoding and decoding explain how meaning is interpreted. Articulation show meaning is linked and reshaped. And so again, articulation shows meaning is linked and reshaped. Intertextuality proves that no text stands alone. It always connects to others. So understanding this concept help us critically analyze media, language, and culture rather than passively consuming them. That could be all. Thank you.